Well, here is something that just may have escaped your notice. I found it last week while I was plowing through the internet. Occasionally I look at those little sites that say this day in history, and every once in a while, when I don't know what I'm going to talk about, I look up that particular Sunday coming this way. And it turns out that in the year 1173, on this very day, construction on the bell tower at the cathedral at Pisa was begun. And from the beginning, of course, they had their share of problems, and yet they kept going. In fact, they kept going for around 200 years working on this tower, finally completing the thing, and at the same time also trying to stabilize it as they went along. Not too very long ago, certainly within our memory, I think it's been only about a decade, engineers actually succeeded in keeping this tower from tipping any further, and they've actually brought it up just a bit. They have stabilized the thing, and now it solidly leans at just the right angle so that for centuries to come it will attract tourists as, of course, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Think about it. Were it straight up and down, who would care? You know, you'd sort of say, what tower? I don't know about that tower. But today it stands as this wonderful, monumental sign of human finitude, kind of a mess from the beginning. And that's what draws the smiles, and that's what draws the attention. There's a wonderful story that most of you, probably all of you know, which unfortunately is probably not true. But it's so grand a story that history can't help but repeat it. It is said that none other than Galileo himself marched up the stairs of this tower with two cannonballs of unequal mass. And remember, mass is the amount of stuff that is found crammed into volume. And he tossed these two cannonballs off the top floor to confirm his thought that both would hit the ground at the same moment. Now, as you also remember from your 7th grade science class, it was 1240 years earlier that Aristotle had said, no, two balls of different masses will fall at a different rate, and one's going to hit the ball or hit the ground earlier than the other. Galileo, though, in this experiment that he probably never physically actually conducted, proved Aristotle wrong, calculating in his mind what is called a thought experiment, and in that he had the two cannonballs falling at the very same speed and hitting the ground at the very same time. Now, my whole point in relating this story is that out of that which was imperfect, a tower that was notorious for an inadequate foundation, a whole new popular understanding of physics was gained. If the tower had been perfect, Galileo would not have been able to test so dramatically his understanding of mass and acceleration and gravity for all of us to see and now know like the back of our hand. In short, he worked within the world in which he found himself, a world in which having humans finite in nature was just part of the territory. And because of it, he was able to purportedly proclaim something brand new, revolutionary when it came to physics. So, why would I be talking about human imperfection a week after our incredibly delicious moment of triumph, the selling of the property, the burning of the mortgage that we did a week ago this very hour right here, the relishing of our being free of $552,000 of debt? Why would I do this? Well, I tell the above stories because I want to remind us all of what happened when our own tower was leaning a little bit, even against the best wishes and the best efforts of every single one of us. Sometimes, when faced with the limitations of humanity, folks get stuck. The Tower of Pisa started listing nearly in the very beginning stages of construction, but they continued building, trying at the same time to address the situation as best they could. And that whole process went on for 2 centuries. In fact, it went on for an entire millennia, because it was ultimately not too many years ago that they finally got it figured out. The point is, they kept moving forward. They did not stop. In an email exchange with our 9 o'clock guy, Steve Winfeld, a week ago, concerning the fact that we all were feeling so much relief in finally paying off that loan, he responded with this. He said, "We are so happy for you and the church. It has been a patient trial. But think of all the good God has done in the meanwhile. Could it be that none of the other good news might have happened for All Saints if the property had sold all those years ago? Might not have seemed necessary. But now we have even much more to rejoice about. God is so good." And I read that, and I reread that, and I reread it a 3rd time, and I thought, he's right. He's right. Out of our need to trust, have faith, rely on one another, rely on those we didn't even know, we founded, I don't know what, the Chile Open, our golf tournament in the middle of winter. And because of that, because of the people who have benefited from that, the agencies, we have saved myriad dogs and cats' lives. We started the dinners up the canyon. That's been going now for 15 years. We've collected hundreds of backpacks, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of backpacks for kids. There are in this building 100 backpacks as of this morning. And I've given away 2 already. There were actually 102. And we have more still coming. And we have money to go out and buy more. That's astounding. We've amassed a boatload of stuffed animals for anxious pediatric patients over there at North Valley Hospital. We have the largest day camp in the diocese that's conducted for free. It's been just astounding. When you came into this place, you saw hundreds of pounds of food out there. Those kids collected that. So not only do we have a ministry towards the kids in this neck of the woods, but they have a ministry to the people in this place as well. Isn't that incredible? We didn't have that going prior to that loan taking off. And, of course, because we didn't have a place to meet, at least over on this side of the valley, we started a service over at the Springs Assisted Living, which is the only connection that some of those folks have to a church service of their tradition. That's amazing. I could go on and on and on and on about this sort of thing. I was mentioning to our junior warden this morning, when we started this process, that narrative, ministry narrative that you all get in September, and you'll be getting another one coming out, it was 12 pages long. You know what it is today? 24. All of that has happened in this amount of time. But had we taken an easier path with the land selling and the like, would we have remembered the normal folks out there just like us who were struggling to somehow pull a rabbit out of a hat? I don't know. Probably we would have, but I don't know if we would have as profoundly as we are today. Well, this morning's gospel speaks in a way to this truth. In a world in which things are supposed to work correctly, and when there's a bump in the road, of course, life is just supposed to be jarred to a stop, God seems again and again and again and again to touch such thinking aside, and he brings life out of stagnation and bringing life even out of death. Just as that Leaning Tower of Pisa contributed to a brand new understanding of physics, and a derailed sale of property continued to contribute to ministry that might not have even dared to have been dreamed, in the time of Jesus, when everything was falling apart, so too did God take a Messiah who was thought to be crazy, and he was also destined for death by the powerful people around him, and he ultimately raised him to be for us available as the bread of life. in a world that was just at that time filled with religious certainty and law that prescribed a means to be in the right relationship with God, Jesus was actually for the world that tower that was listening to starboard. And it was an embarrassment to so many people who looked at him as the Messiah. And even unlike that in Pisa, which finally was shored up probably a decade or two ago, Jesus actually fell. And he fell in a dump, and he fell as a criminal. Yet, it is off of him today, this resurrected Jesus, that we toss our hat in faith. And consuming him in whatever way that happens, all that he was, all that he is, all that he ever will be, surges through us as nourishment. And we've now come to the plate after really what has been an exhausting 3,331 days of debt, carrying a load that felt like the weight of the world. And amazingly, we stepped up to it and we hit a home run. Go figure. How did that happen? About 10 minutes to 8 in the morning, every so often, radio station KOFI plays an introduction to its sports trivia question in which you hear one of the greatest baseball audio clips ever. I told Ron I was going to say something today that's going to double his pledge, probably, when he hears this. It's from the 1988 World Series, and who was playing in that but the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Oakland Athletics, right? It's the bottom of the ninth inning in the first game. The Dodgers are, in fact, down by 1. One of the greatest pitchers in all of baseball was Dennis Eckersley. And I thought a lot of him because I was very much for Oakland. Imagine Ron and I on opposite sides of something. That's hard to believe. But nevertheless, Eckersley walks a guy. The guy then steals second. So the tying run in the bottom of the ninth is on second. All the batter has to do is get a base hit. Get a base hit, we have a tied game. It's a brand new thing. Who should come to the plate but a batter who was not in the lineup? He was not even sitting in the dugout. All this time, he had been in the basement of the stadium having the trainer work on him because he could hardly walk. He had 2 very injured legs. One of them he got from sliding into second base. You remember this too, don't you? An incredible scene. Limping up to the plate comes this man. The count is 2 balls and 2 strikes. All my guy had to do was throw 1 more strike and we would have been out of there. And then Joe Buck, the play-by-play guy for CBS, yelled to his audience, "It's a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable home run for Gibson. And the Dodgers have won the game 5-4. I don't believe what I just saw." And my heart sank. And you felt pretty good at that moment. What the church accomplished 2 weeks ago was a home run. It was not unlike Kirk Gibson's, and it was sensational. It was just sensational. But we ought not be surprised over that. It is useful to remember that when things run as they do within the human condition, where towers lean and batters have bum knees and loans struggle to be paid off, and even one's Lord journeys to a cross and dies, ultimately leaving himself as bread to the world, abundant grace will always, always, always prevail. The resurrection just can't help itself to be victorious and continually in our lives and for time to come bring life out of death. Amen.